Down. I'm Jason Gilbo, JGilbo11. With me is Nick Tasso at the Inefficient 2, breaking down pitching and DraftKings on FanDuel for the Monday slate. And at first glance, I looked at this and I was like, okay, you got some arms here. But it feels much more like a GPP night, just given being considered. A few of them are in good spots.
Yeah, I was looking at it, and I'm not a huge fan at all of pretty much most of these pitchers. So just because I think some guys are in pretty bad matchups or ballparks. So I don't know. I kind of agree with you. It's definitely not a safe day to play lots of cash.
No, definitely not. I mean, a lot of these guys, as you mentioned, either in bad parks. There's something that, there's a couple good things for them, but a lot going up against them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk about that later, but I think we can all figure out what we're talking about.
Yeah, and jumping into this first one here, you got Blue Jays and Yankees, Chad Green versus R.A. Dickey. This game, I mean, not really one that I'm looking to exploit as far as pitching goes. In Yankee Stadium, friendly ballpark there. Even though the Yankees offense really isn't that great, I'm just not really a fan of using Dickey.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Both guys are pretty cheap on really both sites, but there's really not a lot to like with either guy. Maybe Dickey, but you kind of got to catch lightning in a bottle for him. Sometimes his games are just so terrible and so frustrating to roster. So you just better be happy and just ignore him altogether.
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of just an easy fade. And same thing with Green on the other side there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, against Toronto, you always at least have a second thought playing a good starting pitcher against them. And now that it's Chad Green, it's definitely just a stay away.
Yeah, it definitely is. Royals and Tigers next year, Daniel Norris versus Ian Kennedy. There's some weather predicted in this game. But either way, I'm not really a fan of using these arms. I mean, Kennedy is a guy who does struggle on the road. And given the fact that this game is in Detroit against a solid Detroit lineup, he's kind of just a guy I'm not really looking to use.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think his price, too, is a little bit too high for me. So with his price considered and being on the road, it kind of just is an easy fade for me. And then kind of Norris. I mean, it's still not the same Kansas City Royals offense, but at the same time, he really hasn't shown too much outside of one or two starts. So I'm probably not rostering him at all either.
No, I don't think so. He's a guy, I mean, he didn't throw a ton of pitches last time at 85 over 5 innings. I mean, did a pretty solid job against Seattle. But I think for the price, I mean, it's still $6,900, even though it's cheap. I don't think there's really a ton of upside.
No, not at all. I mean, you look at the Kansas City lineup, and like I said, it's not really the same as it was last year, year before, but they still can kind of do some damage, and they don't really have that huge high strikeout potential that you'd want.
Yeah, definitely. Next one here, you got the Reds and Marlins in Great American Ballpark. So a downgrade for both these pitchers right off the bat. Marlins, I mean, losing Giancarlo Stanton for the year today obviously takes a little bit of sting out of the middle of the lineup there. It's kind of a big loss. And, looking through that lineup without him, obviously you still have Azuna, Prado, Yelich, but still it's against the lefty. I mean, obviously Finnegan, I feel like, is one of those high-risk, high-reward plays today. Yeah,
absolutely. He's priced kind of nicely. He hasn't been too bad the last few starts, so I can definitely see kind of rostering him, but it's definitely a risk, especially since this game's in Great American Ballpark.
Yeah, I mean, he's a little bit home run prone. Obviously, that's an issue. He's a guy, I mean, obviously, he doesn't miss a ton of bats, but the Marlins strikeout rate against lefties, I mean, it's certainly still something to mention. 22.6% strikeout rate, so I could maybe see him throwing around 5 to 6 innings, maybe averaging a strikeout per inning, and hopefully coming away, because I'm not really a big fan of Phelps. And in the Reds offense, I mean, they've been coming around a little bit of late, obviously in the second half here, and they're a much better team at home.
Yeah, absolutely. I think most offenses are much better at Great American Ballpark, so that definitely gives them the boost. And then as for Phelps, I think the only way you could play him is on DraftKings and GPPs, just because he is only 4,000. I'm not a huge fan of it, but you looked at what Willie Peralta was able to do in the first for few innings of that game on Sunday, and I think if Peralta can do that, I think Phelps could kind of go out there and have a decent game. But again, that huge or small ballpark is a huge factor against him.
Yeah, it definitely is. And, I mean, really, if you can get 15 DK points at 4K, and obviously given the fact that there is a Coors game that I'm sure you're going to want some exposure to, I mean, he's worth a look, but obviously it's another one of those things where it's just kind of high risk, high reward.
Yeah, absolutely. You never feel safe rostering David Phelps, no matter his price tag and him being on the minimum on DraftKings for starting pitchers. I mean, he's a lot less than some, or not a lot less, but he's less than a lot of players out there, offensive guys. So I think if you can throw him in there and he gets you those 15 points, might not get you the win, but he's still able to kind of get around that 15, maybe even 20 points if he does get the win. And I think it wouldn't be too bad of a play for GPPs.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Move on to the next one here. You got the Padres and Rays. Drew Smiley versus Luis Perdomo. Smiley's a guy I'm intrigued with in tournaments. He's kind of one of those guys we were referring to at the beginning of the show where, in a good spot, but obviously not the most consistent arm on the board. He's a guy who is better off at home this year. Whip is lower by about 50 points. He's averaging about 7 8 more fantasy points per game. And obviously this Padres offense really isn't quite the same given the fact that Melvin Upton and Kemp are both gone. So I'm okay with using him just in a GPP format because of that high strikeout rate.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look what the Padres offense didn't do on Sunday against Steven Matt. So I definitely think that Smiley, another lefty, can go in there and kind of dominate them, even though they do have a bunch of righties in there. Again, there's still some risk just because it is Drew Smiley. And like you said, he's home run prone, especially this year. And you still got some big bats in there like Will Myers. So I think it gives me a little bit of a hesitation, but I personally think he's kind of okay for cash.
Yeah, he is one of those guys who is certainly borderline. Just because, really, I mean, you look at the slate in general, and there is a lot of borderline cash guys that you don't really feel completely comfortable with. But obviously, I think given the slate and the guys around him, it's like, okay, if I have to make a choice, he's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not jumping to roster him, but with everything considered on this slate, I mean, you could do a lot worse.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Smiley's solid strikeout percentage this year. I mean, 23.5%, 10.5% swinging strike rate. So, given the fact that the Padres do strike out a ton against lefties, over 24%, there is plenty of upside here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, against Perdomo, he probably is going to get the win too, regardless, even if he does struggle through 5 or 6. So I think that's another bonus for him.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the Rays are minus 167 favorites. And going with Portamo, I mean, I do like his stuff, but obviously he's a guy who just really hasn't figured things out yet. And I do like his ground ball rate and all that, but overall, I think he's just a pitcher I'm not really looking to use.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna probably stay away from him too, but I think he will put together a good outing just because I think a lot of people will look at what the Rays did and his ownership level will be pretty low since the Rays went off on Sunday. So.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's one thing to consider. But given the fact that, we talked about Phelps, I think I'd kind of rather use Phelps maybe if I'm going with a similar price tag.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, at least Phelps has at times in his career shown that he's okay as a starting pitcher, but Perdomo hasn't shown anything really.
No. Rangers and A's next. Two lefties on the hill here. Martin Perez versus Ross Detweiler in Texas. Great ballpark here. Obviously, both arms are very cheap, but they're cheap for a reason. Neither are good left-handers, and it's just something that I'm staying far away from.
Yeah, I agree with you there. The only guy I might consider playing would be Perez, just because he has a 2.47 ERA at home this year. I think that's merely a fluke, though, and with the weather heating up now in Arlington, I don't think that's going to stay at that low too much longer. So with this,
Yeah, I definitely think overall you're looking at this offense and it's pretty tough to kind of pick on this Rangers offense with Detweiler. As far as using,
yeah, I would stay away from Detweiler regardless of his last start.
yeah, I think so too. And overall, I mean, the A's have kind of given Perez fits. I mean, over his 3 starts this season, so I am a little bit concerned because really the front half of that lineup. I mean, Valencia, Semien, Davis, it's all. Smolinski as well. I mean, those are 4 guys that do have good track records against lefties.
Absolutely. I mean, it's hard to deny that, especially in this ballpark. I mean, maybe if this game was in Oakland, I'd see myself potentially using Perez a little bit more, but I can't see it in this matchup.
Yeah, me either. Nationals and Rockies here, Max Scherzer, Jorge De La Rosa, and, you did potentially have a solid option if this game was in Washington with Scherzer, but it is in Coors. Scherzer is still a GPP play for me tonight just because that strikeout upside is still there. But given the fact that he has allowed 17 home runs on the road this year, I definitely am a little concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. He has a 5.32 ERA in his 4 starts in his career in Coors Field. So that's one of the reasons why I'm going to stay away from him. I can't really trust him. I mean, he might have a good outing, and we've seen a lot more good outings at Coors Field than we usually do, but I just don't think it's going to happen for Scherzer. He's 0-3 there with that high ERA, so I'm just staying away from him.
Yeah, I think people are going to be definitely trending away, which is why I'm kind of just intrigued a little bit in GPPs, just as one of those deep moves where if you did want to make a swerve against the field, he'd probably be the guy to do it with. Just because, I mean, look, I mean, double-digit strikeout rates. I mean, games have been 3 of the last 4 there. He's been pretty solid, but obviously the home run thing is still the issue for me.
Yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, like you said, if you get him a low ownership, maybe 5% or less, and he goes off one of those nights, it's hard to go off at Coors Field. But say he gets you 25 or even 30 DraftKings points when you have this field of starting pitchers that the second best guy might get you 15, 18, maybe even 20. That's really going to kind of push you higher up in those GPPs than most other entries.
Yeah, definitely. And on the other side, I mean, this is an easy fade here, given the Nationals' offense against left-handers this year, and obviously this game being in Coors. Um, we probably don't have to tell you, but obviously De La Rosa not in play.
Yeah, I have one note, and then all it is the word no. So I wouldn't play him.
And in all caps.
No, I was too lazy to even hit the caps lock. So
Just a casual.
He's not worth it. He's not worth the caps lock.
Mets and Diamondbacks here next. Robbie Ray versus Bartolo Colon. Obviously, Robbie Ray coming off a solid start against the Mets. He's going to face him yet again here, but this time at home. Obviously, at home, over a 5 ERA, as many of these Diamondbacks starters struggle in Chase Field. I'm definitely a little bit more concerned here. I'm not a big fan of the DraftKings price tag, but 7,800 on FanDuel, I think he's worth a look there, just because this Mets offense really isn't that great against lefties.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I personally wouldn't play him in cash, but I think for GPPs, he's not a bad price tag on FanDuel. This is a Mets team that's really lackluster right now, and they really don't do much on the offensive side, especially against lefties. So I could definitely see using him. I personally just it's hard to really go with a guy who has a 5+ ERA there.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those boomer bust situations. But I mean, look at Ray. I mean, really solid strikeout percentages here, 27.5%. I mean, that's up there, and it's far better than some of the other names that we have here. So there obviously is a little bit of strikeout upside, but there's also a downside, just given the fact that Chase Field has really been death to these pitchers.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're looking at the slate too, I mean, there's no real guy that stands out. So I mean, if you get into a situation, you could play Robbie Ray, and you could come away happy if he just kind of has 6 mediocre innings. But at the same time, it could kind of backfire.
Yeah, it definitely could. And at the 78 price tag, I mean, obviously you can back some guys there with Coors and using Nationals bats, and because he allows you to do that. So that's another bonus he'll give you.
Yeah, absolutely. Or even use some bats against Cologne in this game too.
Yeah, certainly, and that's a guy who I'm not really looking at. A little bit expensive for my taste. Colone's never really a big upside guy, even though he did have a solid start against them at home. But in Chase Field, I'm not really expecting the same production.
Yeah, absolutely. And second time around, I'm pretty sure that guys like Goldschmidt, he'll be able to do some damage against them, seeing him again.
Yeah, definitely. Mariners and Angels next here. Felix Hernandez versus Ricky Nolasco. And even though Felix Hernandez really hasn't been quite the same guy, he's a guy who really does dominate the Angels. Not a ton of success for those names in that Angels offense. The price tag has come up a little bit. I mean, Felix Hernandez really has been priced down for most of the year, but I'm certainly okay using him in that ballpark, and obviously against this weak Angels offense.
Yeah, you look at Hernandez, and he's been pretty good in his career against the Angels, except for Mike Trout. And I think if you can kind of work around him, he could be in line for a pretty nice start. And like we've been going back and forth and saying how the starting pitchers just aren't too good on this slate, I think he's kind of one of those hidden gems you can kind of go with. I just don't like his price tag, though.
Yeah, that's my one issue. I wish it was kind of in the mid-8s. I think that'd be a little bit more reasonable. It would kind of put him in the cash game range. I still think he's cash game worthy just because I don't see that real blowout factor like I do with some of the other guys like Smiley or Ray in that same price tier. I think he's the safer option.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're gonna have to pay up for him if you really want him, but I think he's kind of deserves it at this point.
Yeah, definitely. And on the other side, I mean, I'm expecting a lot of run support there for him. I mean, Ricky Nolasco, an average at best right-hander, a lot of lefties in this lineup, and even though Nolasco strode against righties too, you obviously got Cruz there sitting in the middle, and even some of these secondary guys have been hitting the ball well.
Yeah, absolutely. Nolasco's an easy fade for me, even though it should be noted that he has pitched a little bit better against lefties, but he still stinks against them. It's just he's really awful against righties.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, you look at Seattle's offense. When you got guys like Seager and Cano, you do give him a bump, even though Nolasco has been reverse splits guy this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm staying away from him in all formats.
Yeah. Pirates and Giants here. Matt Moore versus Ryan Vogelsong, and you know we do got a little revenge game here, narrative street for Vogelsong. Not that I'm looking to use him. I actually don't mind Matt Moore here in this matchup. You look at this Pirates offense; it's really been trending downwards. I know they still rank in the top 10 against lefties, but 23.6% strikeout rate in that ballpark. Moore's been pitching well of late. I'm okay with using him as well.
Yeah, I'm actually okay with using both guys. Matt Moore, like you said, he's going up against the Pittsburgh offense that isn't very good lately, and I just think him pitching in San Francisco, that's definitely just going to help him out a little bit more. So I like him there. His price isn't too bad either, so I don't mind plugging him in. Then on the flip side, I really think that Vogelsong might have a good game. The San Francisco Giants offense really same kind of thing. They have the names in there, they just haven't really produced, and Posey, I believe, scratched Sunday, so I'm not sure if he'll be in there. And if Posey's not in there, you have Vogelsong. I think he might have a good outing. It's a good ballpark. He pitched well for AT&T ballpark when he was there, so I don't mind him. 4,200 on DraftKings is a pretty nice price for some guy who not throw a gem, but could have a pretty good outing.
It's weird that Pittsburgh is one of those teams. I mean, they've turned around. I mean, obviously the credit to their staff, but they've turned around really below average arms and turned them into decent guys. I mean, obviously you look at John Neese, who went there and had an all right production. And obviously Ryan Vogelsong has showed kind of the same thing. And you looked at Jay Happ when he pitched in Pittsburgh. I mean, those guys are by no means good arms getting there. And they come in and come out, and it's like, oh, they're totally different pitchers.
Yeah, don't forget about AJ Burnett too.
Yep.
But I did read an article. I think it was maybe this spring training or last spring training when old Red Sox friend Chris Hansen, or whatever his name was, I can't even remember, Craig Hansen. Chris Hansen's the television guy. But anyways, Craig Hansen, he went primarily to Pittsburgh just because of the program that they have there. So I think you're kind of onto something. They kind of know what to do with former injured guys and guys who just need to get on the right track.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they're a team that have been churning up kind of quality starts. So as far as a low scoring game there, it's definitely going to be one. So I'm okay with kind of using the pitchers there.
Yeah, absolutely. I know Vegas likes San Francisco a little bit more, but I think it should be a little bit closer, more of a pick 'em. So I don't know. It's just one of those things. Whatever guy you can kind of fit into your lineup and use the offense the way you like it.
Yeah, it's certainly one to consider just when lineup construction comes around, especially with that Coors game.
Yeah, absolutely. You got Coors game. You have Great American Ballpark and also Chase Field. So 3 good ballparks for offenses tonight.
Yeah, definitely Texas too. So should be a fun one. I think it's probably going to be relatively high scoring. And as far as the pitchers that we mentioned, it seems like it's probably going to be limited to maybe 2 or 3 that actually hit, as far as maybe the 6 or 7 that we named as possible options.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a couple guys. My 2 favorites would be Smiley and Felix, and everyone else I think you're just going to have to take a huge chance on.
Yep, definitely. I think that sums it up for me as well. So let's go wrap things up with the pitcher nail down. Be sure to check out DailyFantasyCafe.com for all great tools and content.